Tesla beats on earnings, and Elon elects to slow the growth of the company. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So today is an interesting day because obviously, first, just want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. Could really use some help in either or both places in order to assist us in better production qualities. Today's show, we sort of have two processes. One is to review general data points that have already been shared that we thought were interesting. Number one. Number two, we also wanted to sort of jump into some, after that, how we analyze it. Just to start off our day, to note that stock is up at 644 is what I just saw on the screen. And, we'll talk more about what we expect from here. We're having a new setup today, and we'll have our regular sound setup, but appreciate any comments you guys have. If you can't hear me, let me know, and I can look at changing. So what's going on is that there were several data points that we wanted to cover or review. The first is Tesla's 24% margin. So this is a pretty amazing number because even though Tesla is ramping the Model Y right now with a new line, they were able to get better margins than the 22% they had last quarter. So if you recall, the numbers are 18% margins, I guess in the July-August quarter, 22% margins in the October-November quarter, and now we're at 24% margins. And this is despite the fact that we've actually been spending the cost to ramp Y. So there's a bunch of elements that go into this, but basically what's happening is that you have a declining price or cost of batteries as the unit volume rises. And then, there's better throughput of vehicles through the facilities that's being achieved. So we're looking forward to that number continuing to go down in terms of cost, particularly as we bring in China, because the margins there are expected to rise to as much as 35%. So I think this ends up being very, very profitable for Tesla. The second bit of news that we want to look at was the rolling out of the Model Y. As we told you beforehand, we expected this to happen, and it did. And so there's some big implications of this. Number one is that by mid-year, it's expected Tesla, they'll be ready to do about 500,000 vehicles a year coming out of the Fremont plant. What this then does is it sort of sets up a situation where, as Elon pointed out, this is going to represent more than the number of sales achieved by all vehicles combined is going to be the Model Y. So as this product comes in, I'm not saying the Model 3 is dated or anything like that. There's still people that are going to be ordering that because the price point is still going to be lower than the Model Y. But the marginal utility of an SUV, particularly a small one of this type, is excellent, and therefore it's a very important product for Tesla. The next thing we wanted to move on to is that, there's this, what about Y in China? There's a big question. Why did Elon choose to introduce the Model Y in China if, in fact, it won't be available until next year? The answer we're coming up to with that is the fact that the backlog of orders for the $42,000 Model 3 is so large that it wasn't clear how they were going to produce it in China if they didn't have another factory to focus on Ys. So I think that, in light of the virus issues, et cetera, I guess the fact that this isn't done, plus they're finishing out their battery ramp to feed that plant, it looks like that delay might end up being useful in terms of, getting some other things done. Also wanted to, so that sort of covers general numbers that we've gotten. The rest of what's happening is really fascinating in that usually what happens is that, so I have on my list here, while the downgrades are continuing. So there are a number of firms that downgraded Tesla before, and despite the earnings, if it's not a straight downgrade, you're finding companies that are coming in with target prices for the company that are actually below the current stock price. So, I think that this is a bit of a shock. We expect to see some changes in the estimates provided by analysts, which would further justify large institutions choosing to pick up more Tesla shares. And so we're kind of in an interesting standoff right now. Usually the analysts will go in the direction of the stock, then you have the follow-on of the large institutions going to purchase more stock. But in this case, most of the analysts are still not aboard despite the great earnings. So we are waiting for what we've shared as the 3-day rule, which is we'll know a whole bunch in 3 days from now, because even if the analysts don't want to go along, there are a lot of institutions that will have to. And this is in particular a reminder that this is quarter number 2 of profitability, 2 more quarters, and the S&P 500 becomes part of Tesla's options. And once that comes in, those money managers don't have to worry about what the analysts say, because the indice, they're required to buy Tesla proportionate to that indice. And therefore, we're going to see, I'd say, a nice boom in the stock price of Tesla as it heads into that index. The next thing that we wanted to do is sort of review what happened and what should have happened yesterday. So the stock price rose. There's a suggestion made by one of our viewers that there's a concept in Wall Street that's called buy the rumor, sell the news. So in theory, Tesla's stock price should have fallen or start falling now, even if there was a nice boom yesterday, as part of a normal process. The way this process works is that the hedge funds and others who are heavy into high delta stocks as they announce earnings typically leave quickly and move on to their next trades. And this results in a few days of a wait period until the large institutions are ready to buy, based on carefully reviewing all the numbers that were put out by the company. So, when I read this from one of our viewers, I was like, yeah, that sounds good. But the problem with Tesla is things aren't really happening for Tesla the way it tends to work for other companies. And I think I understand why that is. And the answer is illustrated by the Cybertruck. So what happened was there was a discussion yesterday between a money manager and Elon Musk regarding the Cybertruck. And so the suggestion that we've heard from different sources, Elon said 250,000 units as of, let's say, late December. By early January, it was suggested that there are about 450,000 orders for that vehicle. So if you think about it, if they wanted to produce that in Fremont, they'd have to shut down the factory for everything else and only produce Cybertrucks for a year just to meet Cybertruck demand. Or if you spread that over multiple years, you'd have people waiting 2 or 3 years to get their vehicles, possibly, because they have to slot it in for production there. So when asked why it was, or number one, how many orders fully do they have? Number two, what's the plan for its production and when would it arrive? The response given by Tesla was that that's proprietary and we're not going to answer that currently, but we look forward to answering it in the future. So this is a rather strange answer, because what's kind of going on right now is Tesla has said we're going to do for sure 500,000 vehicles. Based on the fact that Fremont can produce 500,000 vehicles, all the vehicles in China, we think 100,000 to 200,000 vehicles this year, in essence adds looking to double the revenue of Tesla year over year. So by Tesla not being cooperative in this manner and having done so repeatedly over time, you basically have a situation where all these companies need that data to facilitate a good command of the numbers instead of being shocked, surprised, and we see these blast offs of numbers that have occurred. So what we wanted to just highlight is the fact that we're in an interesting situation right now where there's a bunch of folks that want to buy more stock and they need sort of strong basis to do so. And the company is somewhat producing the information necessary to make that call, but not completely. So you end up with this misunderstanding, as you may remember from one of our videos, between kind of what's going on. And if you're not being transparent, does that mean there's something bad we should be mindful of? So this brings us to our thesis at the end of the show today, and that is that what's really happening is Elon is actually slowing down the growth of the company as a way to give some of the OEMs that are not prepared a chance to catch up. So I say that because they're not going to do anything with their debt in terms of paying off the expensive debt they have and replacing it with lower cost debt that would allow them to actually open up new factories with that money, etc. So it's a very interesting zone, and because you're not getting analyst cooperation, I think the stock price is fine currently. But at our 3-day mark, where we should be getting a nice 100 to 200 point up move based on company transparency enabling people to buy more, we actually may not see those numbers pop as expected. And the result is that we have great numbers, 700-ish is the target for the stock price, maybe even 800. But if we had more transparency of how the 450,000, for example, 450,000 Cybertrucks were going to be produced, you would have a lot better basis for people to say, okay, let's let this thing ride because we're only a year and a half away from Cybertruck factory in Germany and China contributing so that the company does a double in size this year and then another double next year. So this is kind of a brief show today. We're actually going to come back in a couple hours after the markets open because we wanted to sort of have a trading day discussion that went beyond just what's going on. In general, we think the stock is doing fine. I think it's going to be volatile today, but ends up the day higher. And then everyone's kind of waiting for what the institutions weigh in and do. And we look forward to responding to that, etc. At any rate, I hope you guys made some good money. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, macht's gut, au revoir, lehitraot, enough respect, walk good. Have a great day. We'll see you in a few hours. Thanks for joining us.